all in.
I'm asking him, what do you do best? And we were not able to figure it out, but it's a lot of things.
Trump chaos and dysfunction is back, baby. Co-president Elon kills the Republican plan to fund the government and brings us closer to a shutdown. As the House Speaker loses control of his caucus, we'll get the latest from the Hill. Then,
for what they did, honestly, they should go to jail.
So you think Liz Cheney should go to jail?
Trump escalates his threats of show trials for his political foes. Sherilyn Ifill joins me on that. Plus,
these are lawful and legal aviation activities.
You don't insult people by telling them they're not seeing what they're seeing with their own eyes.
This is mass hysteria, everybody.
Keep watching the skies. What the great drone debate reveals about public trust.
Our local people who have questions about these drones should not have to shake an 8-ball to get an answer.
When All In starts right now. Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. Well, we all learned about the three branches of government in civics class, about the two chambers of Congress, the House and the Senate, and the general constitutional structure of our government. How hard it is to get hundreds of elected representatives of all stripes to agree on big legislation. What we did not learn about is the Elon Musk branch of the government. The world's richest dude, Elon Musk, effectively bought himself control over these United States, apparently. He spent $44 billion to turn Twitter into his personal propaganda outfit and promote Donald Trump. And then he went on to spend $250 million to help get Trump elected. He is now using that authority before Trump is even sworn in to unilaterally determine outcomes for the American people. A guy who's never received a single vote, who is constitutionally ineligible to serve as actual president, who polling shows isn't wanted there by the American people, I guess is now effectively running these United States. So last night, congressional Republicans unveiled a short-term deal, like there have been many others in the years I've been covering Congress, to keep the government funded through March 14th of next year. It was a last-minute decision to avert a government shutdown for the holidays ahead of this weekend's deadline. Republican Speaker Mike Johnson agreed to the deal. Democratic Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, Dems still have the Senate majority, agreed to the deal, but they apparently forgot to ask Elon Musk. I don't think Musk has any idea what is actually in the bill. In fact, I feel quite certain of that. He urged his followers to use AI to summarize it for him, but he still spent the day whipping votes against it to his hundreds of millions of followers on the social media platform he owns. He tweeted more than 70 times against the deal to keep the government open, telling Republicans to kill the bill. And then once it looked like Musk killed the bill, again, this is all Musk, okay? Trump and J.D. Vance, do you remember them? Remember those guys? The guys that ran for office? Well, then they were like, they came out against it as well. Oh, I guess the train's leaving the station, issuing a hasty statement on social media and telling reporters that they now want a different way to fund the government.
Would you support a clean CR?
Well, what the president believes is we should support a clean CR so long as it contains a debt limit increase. That's the position of the president, and that's what we're going to try to push for.
Are you supporting a government shutdown then?
Have a good night, guys. Thanks.
Just to be clear, and we'll hit on this a little more, there's never any discussion of the debt ceiling in all of this. They pulled it out of nowhere today because Musk got ahead of him. That's why. Because Musk sees the initiative. Elon Musk, the guy who really runs things. He's not just Trump's co-president. I think that's way too low a title. He's the head dude in charge. And House Republicans certainly know who they are taking their marching orders from.
Elon put out a pretty serious post there, but that's the sentiment of the American people. This is why we won on November 5th.
When sunlight is put on these bills, when now Elon and Vivek can talk about it, when members of Congress, when we look at the bills, the American people don't like what they see.
The American people are paying zero attention to any of this. Zero. Elon put out a pretty serious post. Oh, well, then if Elon put out a serious post. The Republican House Majority Leader, Steve Scalise, confirmed the bill's not dead. It's unclear what comes next, or if there are votes for an alternate bill, as Vance alluded to, which now adds this other new wrinkle, very complex in. But Elon Musk, the guy who's running things in the Republican Party, and I guess the country, says he wants a shutdown. It's not going to hurt him. There's hundreds of billions of dollars. He's already declaring victory on Twitter, posting, "Your elected representatives have heard you." Oh yeah, us. And now the terrible bill is dead, says the billionaire. The voice of the people, meaning me, has triumphed. Melanie Zanona is a senior congressional reporter for Punchbowl News, contributor to NBC News. She joins me now from Capitol Hill. Melanie, we have spoken many times amidst Capitol Hill chaos on this very program. You have covered a lot. This is a new one, I think.
Yeah, I am getting a little bit of deja vu from when I covered the Capitol back in Trump's first term, but now we have Elon Musk in the mix, which has really just sort of amplified the chaos. And I think it's important to point out here, we were joking about how much Republicans really are looking to Elon Musk for their cues, but they view him really as the most powerful proxy. They think he speaks for Trump. And so when he was tweeting that today, members were taking notice. That tweet was flying around. I saw people on their phones on their way to votes looking at that tweet. One of them pulled it out and showed me, and that mattered. I mean, Musk has Trump's ear. Musk spent hundreds of millions of dollars in the last election. He was talking about threatening to primary or have these members ousted if they didn't do what Musk was calling for, which was vote against this large CR, this large spending bill. And then Trump, really just threw an extra grenade into the mix when he said, not only do I not like the CR that Mike Johnson was going to put forward, but now I want you guys to consider a debt ceiling increase, which, just to be clear, no one was talking about this. The deadline is not expected to happen for another 6 months. I will say, Chris, that me and my colleagues at Punchbowl News had been hearing that Trump had been privately complaining about the debt ceiling and not wanting to have to do it on his watch for a while now. But at no point, at any point in these negotiations, were they talking about the debt ceiling. And that is an extremely complicated issue to try to throw in the 11th hour. So that's where we're at right now. We're days away from a government shutdown. Trump and Elon Musk tanked the plan that Johnson had cut with Democrats. And right now, it's just very unclear how they are going to get out of this jam. It's really, we've been calling it the nightmare before Christmas, because truly it is just a mess for Johnson and Republicans right now.
Here's the Democratic leader, Hakeem Jeffries, came out to talk to the press, and he had this to say today. Take a listen.
House Republicans have now unilaterally decided to break a bipartisan agreement that they made. House Republicans have been ordered to shut down the government and hurt everyday Americans all across this country. House Republicans will now own any harm that is visited upon the American people that results from a government shutdown or worse.
Now, there's always an asymmetry with these shutdown fights, because I think on a sort of substantive level, Democrats don't want to shut the government down, and Republicans tend to be like, what's it? Well, who cares? So there's always this kind of imbalance, right? Like, Democrats genuinely, not for political reasons, like just out of like what they believe, don't want to shut the government down. Taking that aside, and the people who could get hurt, which we'll talk about in a second, politically, there's no reason for Schumer or Jeffries to help Johnson out of this jam, right?
Exactly. Let me walk you through what the Democratic thinking is right now. They did this huge bipartisan deal with Speaker Johnson. He reneged on that deal. So their thinking is, if you're going to put up a plan B, maybe a clean CR, maybe this clean CR with the debt ceiling, although I'm very skeptical of that as well, you can do that, but you're going to have to do it with your own Republican votes. We're not going to bail you out. You walked away from that deal. Why would we help you when, after weeks and weeks of these tough negotiations and celebrating all these wins that we had, if you're going to pull the rug out from underneath us, we have no incentive to help you. And on the debt ceiling point, they don't even have to address the debt ceiling for at least another 6 months here. So there's very little incentive for Democrats to bail them out, especially when it was Trump and Elon Musk who were responsible for this thing going up in flames. And if the government were to shut down, Republicans are in control in the House. The Democrats are still in control in the Senate. But I think their belief right now is that Republicans would get a lot of the blame for a government shutdown. And they're also going to frame it rightly so. So this is a preview of what's to come in Trump's Washington.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I've learned from this is that, like, no one remembers this stuff in 3 weeks or a month or 5 months. So, like, the long-term political consequences, I think, are minimal. Although I do think the Elon Musk idea, Musk is calling for this. Just shut it down until Trump is sworn in. A month of, like, Coast Guard folks not getting checks and real serious things happening. that would really, I think, be a disastrous situation to inherit as Donald Trump with like a one-vote majority in the House and having to pass a CR right away.
Right. I mean, here's the thing. Musk is a billionaire, first of all, and he is not an elected politician. He does not have an understanding of how Congress works. I get what Trump and his allies are saying about trying to, we need disruptors and people who think differently because they believe it hasn't worked the way, normal politicians have tried to run government. But that being said, this is what happens when you elevate someone like Musk to a position. Johnson it's his own fault here. He elevated Musk, and now Musk is stabbing him in the back by threatening to take down this bill, threatening his members. So that's the situation we find ourselves in now. And again, this is just going to be a taste of what's to come over these next few years here.
Melanie Zanona, as always, great to have you. Thank you very much for that. This is all a really good reminder of just how absolutely chaotic and dysfunctional and incompetent Republican governance has been, particularly under Donald Trump and a Republican-run House. We've seen this before. Republican Speaker Mike Johnson is already losing his grip on his caucus. He's facing down a new year with a one-vote majority. He can't pass a continuing resolution to keep the government open, thanks to the unelected co-president, or really president, Elon Musk. And there are already people calling for the Speaker's ouster. On top of all that, today we learned that in a closed-door meeting earlier this month, the House Ethics Committee voted to release its years-long investigation into alleged sexual misconduct and drug use by former Congressman and former Trump Attorney General pick Matt Gaetz. Gaetz desperately wanted that report to stay unpublished. So today on social media, he threatened his former House colleagues with possible reprisals, including a threat to take a seat with the incoming Congress and, quote, to expose every Me Too settlement paid using public funds, even of former members. Just about the same level of utter chaos you've come to expect from the Republican House in recent years. They didn't suddenly figure out how to govern competently just because they managed to win an election by 1.5 points. Brendan Buck served as press secretary to Speaker John Boehner, as well as chief communications advisor to Speaker Paul Ryan. He joins me now. Brendan, I was thinking of you because I know that you've been sitting in a speaker's office with some kind of deal when a Donald Trump tweet came in to blow it up. But the not even being Trump of this is so striking to me. Like, the idea that you've now created two people that can just walk in and blow it up is wild.
Absolutely. As you're whipping bills back in the first Trump era, you always were on pins and needles. What's he going to do? What's he going to tweet? But at least Donald Trump had like a staff around him who was trying to keep him on the straight and narrow. And something Melanie was getting to, Elon Musk doesn't know how any of this works. Half of the tweets that he was putting out today were just misinformation about what was in the bill. He said everybody should read it, but he clearly didn't or doesn't understand how some of this stuff works. Talking about no bills should pass until January 20th. What does that even mean? And so I imagine sitting there in any member of Congress's office, they're all used to those people. You get your constituents who kind of only understand what's happening. But instead of just sort of your random misinformed guy in your district, you have perhaps the person with maybe the second biggest megaphone in the entire country disrupting things. So a bit of a disaster. The only thing I'm kind of curious about, and I think you hit on this, is how long is Donald Trump going to be okay with the perception that someone other than him is calling the shots? At some point, he's going to have to take him down a peg. I imagine he will at some point.
I mean, that was what's so striking. I mean, Trump was laying low. This was I think, and Melanie said that, this is interpreted as essentially proxy. I don't think, and reporting may bear this out one way or the next, I truly don't know. This felt like Musk freelancing. I mean,
100%.
And it's just like, I don't like it, I'm killing it. It's like, wait, who's this guy? Like, I mean, it's wild because, as you said, like, yes, Trump had a staff and he was part of the constitutional order. I mean, crucially, like, whatever you want to say about the guy, we do have a presidency. He was occupying that office. This is just like elevating like the most obnoxious person into a comment section to like run your nuclear labs and your vaccine protocols and your government. Like, I don't think it should work like this. It's like, all right, buddy.
I think you're absolutely right that Trump jumped to the front of the parade here and just said that I'm with him too. I will say, I think probably maybe the smartest thing I've ever seen Donald Trump do legislatively is push for the debt limit here. That would actually be a very wise move for him to clear the decks and not have to deal with that later. I'm not entirely sure that's out of the question at this point. It would be wild if he could convince enough Republicans that they need to vote to increase the debt limit. But now he's basically putting the question to not just, I think, as you pointed out, to his own members, but to Democrats. and say, are you willing to have a shutdown over this going into Christmas? That's really, really tough. I don't know that they have the guts to actually put that on the floor, but if they could pull it off, it would be very smart.
Yeah, I mean, my feeling about this on the Democratic side is your price for entry is getting rid of the debt limit. Like, if you're going to vote for this under these conditions, we're not playing this game and handing some future Republican Congress an enormous rifle to point in our faces and shove down our throats, as they have kept doing. Like, it shouldn't be there. We got rid of it again before under Dick Gephardt. We can get rid of it again. So that's if I'm a Democrat, that's my price for entry. On the Senate side, if you want this, we don't clear the decks for your guy. We get rid of it.
I'll give you another thing to think about, though. If they don't do that, and this goes into next year, that's a great opportunity for Democrats to ask for more stuff again. And that's how we got into this situation in the first place. Republicans can't fund the government. They can't increase the debt limit. That's why Hakeem Jeffries was getting a bunch of stuff right now. Mike Johnson couldn't pass a 3-month CER on his own. A 3-month CR. He couldn't do that on his own, so Jeffries got a bunch of stuff. And so if they can set up as many checkpoints along the way next Congress, the next CR in March, whatever that goes to, the debt limit, all of these moments are times where Hakeem Jeffries can ask for things.
Right, particularly because that margin is, it's 220, 215, minus Gates is 219, minus Stefanik and Walz, you're down to 217, 215. You can only lose one vote. Like, that's tough. That is tough sledding for anyone. For the best, most gifted, wizard of all time. I'm not sure Mike Johnson's that. Brendan Book. Thank you very much. Coming up, the ginned up excuse Donald Trump is using to persecute people who stand up to him. Sherilyn Ifill joins me to talk about the show trial threat next. If there's one thing Democrats and Donald Trump agreed on before the election, it was that Trump wanted to weaponize the government against his political foes. We're already getting a blueprint of how he might do that. Trump's toadies in the House just ginned up a criminal referral, basically spelling out how the FBI can use trumped up charges to go after one of MAGA's most vocal critics, former Republican Congresswoman Liz Cheney. Trump received the message loud and clear, posting that Liz Cheney could be in a lot of trouble, effectively signaling that his choice for FBI Director Kash Patel, should he be confirmed, should target her come January. Democrats labeled Trump a threat to democracy during the presidential campaign. Remember that? We were all here. We all saw it. Trump won the election anyway, and now he's, guess what, acting like a threat to democracy, as they warned. And what I would say is Democrats can't just plug their ears and pretend it isn't happening now. Someone's going to say something, right? If Trump's FBI shows up at Liz Cheney's house to put her on a show trial. Sherilyn Ifill holds the Vernon Jordan Chair in Civil Rights at Howard University, where she's the founding director of the 14th Amendment Center for Law and Democracy. She previously served as the president and director counsel of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, and she joins me now. Let's start on this, on the explicitness here of this these machinations. I mean, he pledged during the campaign. He said in an interview on NBC he thinks these people should be in jail. This was teed up by Republican allies in Congress. Now he doesn't have to actually write a memo or call Kash Patel silently. Like, it's all there for all of us to see.
Yeah, and he said in an interview that, I'm not going to tell them to do it, but I think they have to look into it, right? So we know what Trump's intentions are. And I think you hit the nail on the head earlier, Chris. Trump has not ceased to be a threat to democracy because he won the election, right? He is actually more of a threat. And I think I understand the difficulty that the Democrats are having figuring out how to go forward and how to navigate this landscape. It is difficult, but it is not going to be effectively navigated by pretending that Trump won an election and now we all come together and make things happen. It also won't work to pretend as though this is Trump's first term. Too much has happened since Trump's first term. January 6th happened, the January 6th hearings happened, but most importantly, the Supreme Court happened. And the Supreme Court told the country and told Donald Trump that nothing that he does while he is president, except for the most extreme activities on the outer edges of his executive power, can be criminally prosecuted. And most importantly and most frighteningly, they suggested that even anything he does with the Department of Justice, that he is essentially over the Department of Justice in very explicit ways. And Trump understands now that he has full authority and power, that he won't be held accountable. And where there is impunity, there will be excess. And the question is, how are the Democrats going to deal with this? How are they going to talk about it? And how are they going to deal with it?
Yeah, one thing that's been interesting is there's this debate happening, right, about how to deal with Trump, right? And it's a debate in some ways the contours are familiar to other debates I've seen after George W. Bush won in 2000. Famously, Ted Kennedy worked with him on his signature piece of legislation, which was the No Child Left Behind Act, right? So they thought, okay, well, he won. We're gonna meet him halfway. Mitch McConnell took an opposite tack when Barack Obama was elected, right? We're gonna resist. What's striking to me is that all of that is on one axis, like, oh, what should we do about the bills? Then there's like, well, what are you going to do when he starts prosecuting people? Like, they're just on different axes. And whatever conversation's happening here feels like removed from this one, if that makes sense.
Well, in a way, I think what the Democrats should be doing is on the bills, they should be talking directly with their counterparts, which are the Republicans in the House and the Senate. That's who they should be engaging with. That's who they should be calling out. That's who they should be exposing and demanding that they do their job. That's who they should be telling the American people how embarrassing it is that these people have allowed one random billionaire to essentially take over their job, that they have allowed the president to take over the historic role of Congress in a system of checks and balances. No one's explaining that to the American people, that having the president call and say, kill this bill, is a problem, right? So they need to be doing that first and foremost. That's what they should be doing on the bills. The other overarching piece is kind of their meat and potatoes. Let's remember the words of Ruby Freeman. Do you know what it's like to be targeted by the President of the United States? I don't presume that because Liz Cheney is wealthy and a conservative and from a conservative old line family, that it is not also troubling to her to be targeted by the President of the United States. This is very serious. And obviously ABC News thought that there was a problem of being targeted by the President of the United States as well. So this is very serious. And Trump is going to unleash what he said he was going to unleash. He is not satisfied by winning. That is not what satisfies him. He needs to know that his critics are frightened of him. And so nothing that you say now, we're willing to work with him, and all of these nice statements that you could make about a George W. Bush, and you could find policy practices that you agree with. Trump wants to close the Department of Education. Trump wants to weaponize the Justice Department. Trump wants to fire black generals and others who support diversity from the Department of Defense. These are not things that you can work with him on. So Trump is who Trump is. And in addition to the things that he believes, he's also incredibly vindictive, and he now has the power to carry forth his appetite for vengeance. And the Democrats need to array themselves as the protectors of the American people, as the people who are explaining to the country that this danger exists, and who are vowing to do everything in their power to protect ordinary people, whether they are journalists, whether they are ordinary election workers, whether they are people who criticize the president in their writing or in their speeches, that they are going to protect our democracy by ensuring that we still live in a country where the citizens have the right to criticize those in power. And I'm not hearing any leaders in the Democratic Party speak to that. I'm hearing them talk about, the continuing resolution, which is incredibly important, but that's about exposing Mike Johnson as being the feckless, ineffective, quote unquote, leader that he is. I think it's a wonderful opportunity to expose him and to expose the Republicans and to expose the danger of having a billionaire, a capricious billionaire who actually knows very little about how the government works, come in and put his thumb on the scale. And I just would like to see the Democrats marshal what I think are these tools and this power that would give them the ability to talk directly to the American people. The Democrats' game right now is communication, and I'm not hearing the communication.
Yeah, I mean, public communication and public opinion are kind of everything at this point. I saw polling today, to your point, that asked people, the Washington Post, we had it earlier, I think we have it now, but, do you approve or disapprove of Donald Trump going after journalists, prosecuting journalists that wrote things he didn't like, and it was 88% disapprove. Like, the core civic commitments of this country are, it doesn't all change overnight. People don't like that. And someone's got to speak up for them. And I think you're right. right about fear, particularly coming from, we should say, LDF, where you worked, which is a place that did its work under threats of physical violence constantly.
Yes.
And people did the work they had to do.
People don't understand that. Yes, that civil rights organizations and others, everyone is frightened. There's nothing wrong with saying that you're afraid of retaliation and violence. There's nothing wrong with that. No. But we press through and we do the work anyway. Right. And it would be really great if the leadership of the opposition party would make clear that they stand with those who are nevertheless going to do their job as journalists, as lawyers, as activists, as ordinary citizens who have the right to speak truth to power.
Sherilyn Ifill, always a pleasure to have you. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Chris.
Still ahead, as Trump threatens mass deportations, a surprising suggestion from a veteran immigration reform advocate on how Democrats should handle immigration. That's next. For weeks, headlines have consistently reflected worry about Donald Trump's promise of mass deportations and the preparations needed to pull them off. What isn't being talked about as much is how Stephen Miller, the incoming White House Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy and former architect of family separation, is working behind the scenes on a huge border bill with Republicans. We can only imagine what his anti-immigration border bill would look like. But as this is happening, it's up to Democrats to figure out their messaging on immigration, and right quick, since Stephen Miller's plans are going to come fast and furious. And just so happens two of the most veteran immigration reform advocates, Cecilia Munoz and Frank Sherry, who have decades between them working on this very issue, just put out a piece in The Atlantic charting out a path saying that Democrats needed to move back to the center on immigration. The right argues to kick out and keep out all immigrants. The left argues to let all comers stay. Both amount to overreaches that will eventually backfire. Voters want a middle way, but if they're forced to choose between those who promise control and those who seem indifferent to chaos, they will choose the former. Back in 2009, Cecilia Munoz served as director of President Obama's White House Domestic Policy Council. She now co-chairs the board for Welcome.us, which assists refugees get settled in the United States, and she joins you now. I got to say, Cecilia, I think I interviewed you in 2005 or 6 when I was writing about McCain-Kennedy. And immigration reform. I've interviewed Frank for years. I've followed this issue. It really caught my attention to see your name and his name. You guys are, people that don't know this, you are two people that have worked in this space for decades. Make the argument you are making. Why did you write this piece?
We wrote this piece because I am very concerned that if we don't get our arms around this issue, we have great difficulty wrestling the country back from the autocrats. We Democrats have been in a place where we had a posture that the public supported on immigration. When President Obama ran against Mitt Romney was like the immigration hardliner. President Obama had a balanced approach, and the public was with him on that issue. We've gone from owning the issue to losing in part because of this issue. And what Frank and I are arguing in this piece is that we need to go back on offense, that there is a winning formula for Democrats on immigration, but you have to lean in. You have to propose solutions that are convincing to the American public. And part of the reason we are where we are is that we haven't done that effectively.
So what is that? What is that? Give me the 45-second version of that.
The policy formulation combines border enforcement with pathways for the folks to legal status for the folks who are here over the long term and opening up legal immigration. But in some ways, the permission structure is that we have to demonstrate that we're serious about the border. We have to get the asylum system in particular under control. There are ways to do that. There are policy formulations. In fact, the Biden administration has put a number of those forward. The problem is they did it too late to be convincing to the American people that they were serious. And the president has been reluctant to talk about the issue. And as a result, that left a space that, unfortunately, the wrong people filled.
Yeah, there's two things coming up here, right? There's the mass deportation, which has been promised, and they're going to attempt to effectuate. Some encouraging polling today, although maybe not as encouraging as I'd like. Washington Post, University of Maryland asking, should the military be used for mass deportations? 54% opposing, 42% support. But in other parts of that same poll, you see people all over the place. Should illegal immigrants be deported? 65% say yes. But if you say, should illegal immigrants who have lived here a long time and had jobs be deported, then it goes down to 40%. So there is, and even these interviews we've been seeing with people that voted for Trump that said, if you try to deport my neighbor, I'll stand in front of you. There's a lot of messiness in what public opinion is.
Exactly. But and folks will go for the proposal which seems to provide the most order in the absence of an alternative. And I think part of our problem is that folks felt like they were voting for a solution, even if they were uncomfortable with Donald Trump as a person, as a candidate, and uncomfortable with his ideas. It felt like solution versus no solution. And that is the wrong place for Democrats to be. It is uncomfortable to lean into this issue. Believe me, I know that. But
I'm sure you got some calls about that essay.
And I have scars from my years of government service. But the fact of the matter is, when Democrats are about fixing the problem and are prepared to make some of the hard choices that are involved in fixing a problem, we succeed on this issue. Our problem is that we're having this conversation on Donald Trump's frame, which is all about who can be tougher. But tough is not actually what solves our problems. We need to be the party, again, that offers solutions. And we've demonstrated in the past that Democrats can win on this issue.
Well, there's going to be, Stephen Miller's going to propose a bill. There's going to be some sort of border bill here. And, if you look at the history of American immigration, we have the first big national immigration is the Chinese Exclusion Act, not exactly our proudest moment. We had the enormous boom of, Ellis Island and how many people, including my own family, came here, and then shut the door in 1924 with a piece of legislation that the Nation magazine called the Klan Act, because it basically was an explicitly white supremacist system of quotas. In 1965, that's reversed, and that's created the pathway here. How do you think, if we get Stephen Miller's version of the 1924 Act, Democrats are going to have to oppose that.
Democrats will absolutely have to oppose that, but I would prefer that they not try to beat it with nothing. I'd much rather that Democrats propose a vision for how our system can work. The policy is available. This is not an intractable problem, but we need to not just be against things. We need to demonstrate that we know how we can make this work. And I believe that the American public is prepared to be generous with respect to immigration policy if they believe the government is capable of doing the fundamentals, including making sure there is order and fairness at the border. That's where we need to be.
The asylum system is going to get redone. I think everyone now agrees that the current system doesn't work. It doesn't work for the people who are making an enormously horrible and dangerous journey and being exploited. It doesn't work politically. I think hundreds of thousands of people have come in here, and by and large, I'm happy that they're not where they were, frankly. But I'm not the median voter. And I've learned that, right? That's just sort of where it is. So that's going to get redone. The question is whether Democrats play ball with that.
Well, exactly. I think that, it is not unreasonable for the American public to expect that their government to keep things orderly and fair at the border. The challenge is that whenever a Democrat proposes something that includes enforcement, there is a world of pain with respect to, frankly, where the advocacy community is. And what Frank and I are arguing is that we need to create the space for people to come back into the center and say, there's a right way and a wrong way to do this. We're about to get a very big dose of the wrong way to do this. That's going to cause untold